If you're an investor, executive, or board member, 2025 is going to be one to watch when it comes to AI. In this video, I'm going to share my perspective on what specifically I think is worth keeping an eye on as the AI boom continues next year. So let's get into it. For starters, this is not intended to be investment advice. This video mostly contains perspectives on the enterprise case for AI. Now, while I think it's absolutely fair to say that the case for monetizing consumer AI at scale is attractive, I think it's far from settled. So I'm not going to be addressing consumer AI here, other than to say I can think of more free AI in my personal life than paid AI in my personal life. A lot of the popular tools out there are free in their most basic form. And for me, I'm just not convinced that people will pay for them if they have to, especially at their current maturity. I just don't think there are many order winners out there. But after a few additional years of baking and seasoning, maybe. So, on to the enterprise. We've all heard AI investment is booming. What we hear less about in the mainstream is what kind of burden that places on corporate leaders to monitor developments in the space in real time. For example, if you're an IT security leader or audit committee member, you know the concept of data security is rapidly evolving in the age of AI. Historically, data security is focused on protecting the perimeter of the digital estate, but that approach, while important, it's ultimately going to be insufficient moving forward. With the rise of Gen AI, businesses who choose to adopt are going to have no choice but to focus more on data centric security, which focuses on protecting the data itself wherever it resides, because that data will ultimately be the key to powering the enterprise AI models of the future, which, by the way, very well could become the company's secret sauce as time goes on. So, increased focus on data centric security is the first theme I think we're going to hear a lot more about in 2025. The next theme I think we're going to hear quite a bit about in 2025 is source data quality. Why is that? Well, imagine if you're a CFO who's responsible for the return profile of your company's investments. You may not be wrong to think you need to tread carefully investing in Gen AI if data quality in your estate is poor, because garbage in, garbage out. But that also begs several questions, like what am I supposed to do about that? What am I supposed to do to ensure, or even fund the cleanup of the dirty data to ensure quality data ends up getting used in my AI? And then there's that G word, governance. What do I need to do to ensure more robust data governance in addition to that data quality management over data that I know I need? I think the realization will be there in neon lights for executives. Without strong data governance, data quality management, and data protection processes, the true potential, the value of Gen AI isn't likely to be realized due to that age old garbage in, garbage out problem. Now, to hammer this point home a few months ago, Gartner predicted that at least 30% of generative AI projects will be abandoned after proof of concepts by the end of 2025 due to poor data quality and inadequate risk controls. Gartner also predicted that by 2027, 60% of organizations will fail to realize the anticipated value of their AI use cases due to incohesive data governance frameworks. And that concept of AI failing due to data governance, well, that's pretty scary for the AI bull case when you think about sectors that create and possess inherently sensitive data. For example, financial and healthcare institutions deal with vast amounts of sensitive, unstructured data for everything from customer service to patient care to fraud detection and everything in between. So, implementing AI with known imperfections in an organization's data, it will introduce greater risks to everything from privacy breaches to bias in the AI models themselves. So, you can see if you're an executive or a board member, there's a lot to think about before you go headfirst into adopting the technology, especially if you're in a regulated space or the public sector where compliance is non negotiable and an event can cause a loss in trust and brand erosion. And as companies find themselves unable to resist the urge to train models in a more multimodal way, which you may have heard about, it's this idea of training models with stuff beyond text, videos, pictures, and so on. There's going to inevitably be more data there to enrich those models and make them smarter, but it's also going to be a bigger and faster growing data problem because let's face it, there is a lot of junk and misinformation out there. And then, if you're not a tech company, do you really have the ability to attempt to train models with skilled people in house to protect against all that stuff we just mentioned? Probably not, which means you're going to have to rely on partners. But those partners won't necessarily understand the business as well as your management team, which is going to leave open the possibility of suboptimal data decisions. And if those vendor company partnerships can't get tight enough fast enough, the business case for AI project A, B, or C could be a busted play before it even starts. I do think there's growing awareness of this on the street, which is why I also think the third theme we're going to hear more about is prove it. The street boards and executives are all likely to be on the lookout for any signs of faster adoption outside of big tech and tangible, verifiable proof points on KPIs that matter to executives and investors alike. Things like margin enhancement, revenue growth, efficiencies, and so on. If we get more of these as time goes on, I think it's easy to see how the bull case for AI could get bolstered. But when you take all of that together, you wouldn't be wrong to think that the success of AI hinges in part on quality control and having good, clean data with tight governance around it within the adopting companies themselves. Meaning, never mind if the AI tech from the tech companies is ready for prime time, are the companies who want to adopt actually ready to adopt? And because of that, I think the fourth theme that we're likely to hear more about is changing AI spend profiles. Why? Well, you have to wonder. Are companies reprioritizing AI in their IT long range plans at the expense of other IT line items? Or are they increasing their spend on IT as a whole? And if they're doing that, are they doing it at the expense of other BUs or support organizations' budgetary allocations? The real question here is, will AI investments get pulled forward faster in terms of prioritization, or will all tech spend categorically need to grow, or both? And of course, there's going to be a run cost implication to earnings that lives many cycles beyond the initial investment organizations make in AI. So, for financial managers to grow overall tech spend without a cost offset somewhere else, it's going to require a tangible ROI from these AI investments before they get too deep, which is the same as saying executives will need to see if the benefits are likely to be great enough to justify major ongoing investments in AI. In fact, we may see leaders decide there's basic AI spend that they're willing to invest in, but they might reserve large scale transformation level investment until they feel more comfortable with the state of the data in their estate and their overall data readiness, which brings me to the fifth theme I think we're going to hear a lot more about in 2025. Those are the indirect risks to the AI bull case. For the sake of time, I'm just going to touch on one: power, and specifically not enough of it. Power is going to be a major issue, and we already are starting to hear a little bit about that. Here's some stats that I think are going to surprise you, all from sustainability by numbers. Data centers in some states today in the United States are already responsible for over 10% of the electricity demand in those states. In Ireland, a common offshore location for large US companies, data centers make up around 17% of the electricity demand in that country. Now, within the data center itself, it's not fair to peg all the power demands on AI. It isn't the only driver of electric demand in those facilities, but it could make up 19% of that demand by 2028, according to Goldman Sachs. So we need power, got that. Uh, do we have the capacity to produce it and produce it sustainably? I'm going to answer that by saying a quick no, we do not, and supporting that with an anecdote from the Spark, which is MIT Technology Review's weekly climate newsletter. The topic is nuclear power demand to support AI. So we've all heard about the 3 Mile Island tragedy. Well, the site's owner of 3 Mile Island just announced in September that it now has plans to reopen the plant because it has signed a deal with Microsoft, who will purchase the plant's entire generating capacity over the next 20 years. So when you think about that announcement, what does it say about big tech's anticipated power needs? Seemingly that they're going to need a lot of it. And as power needs grow, so too will the environmental impact if companies aren't careful. I think we're going to hear more and more about sourcing electricity in 2025 because if it only comes from fossil fuels, we should expect carbon emissions to increase sizably. Which brings me to my last theme for AI in 2025: the environmental impact of AI. For example, there are significant on the ground concerns from local governments and within the engineering community about the substantial amount of water, you heard that right, water, that's going to be required to cool data centers that are running AI operations. If you've ever been in a data room, you know they run hot. A data center, if it's not properly cooled, could quickly become really dangerously hot if really within minutes, especially if it's a high performance center that's densely packed with servers. It takes a lot of energy to cool the kind of heat these buildings throw off. In fact, the cooling systems are often accounting for a significant portion of the building's overall energy usage, 40% by some estimates. Now, can the cooling systems be designed water free? Sure. But water-free cooling system design solutions often come with the downside trade-off of needing more energy to operate. So there's no free lunch and it's complex stuff. I have an engineer in my network who anecdotally told me recently that the complexity of designing cooling systems for data centers is equivalent to that of trying to design a cooling system for 20 inner city skyscrapers that are glued together. It's extremely complex. So let me wrap up by saying this. If AI was not a tech product, let's say it was in a regulated space like healthcare, we'd be talking about clinical trials and evidence-based conclusions about the effectiveness of the product to ensure people were safe in using the treatment. But AI is not a healthcare product. It's a tech product. So the rigor around the discovery, the safety, the effectiveness, and so on, it falls in large part on the executives and boards and on their tech partners and their executives and boards. And although they won't have clinical outcomes they can look at, they certainly can and should heavily scrutinize the point in time or in value of their AI implementations, along with a variety of other technical performance, business value, and adoption metrics. So I think 2025 is the year the standard by which executives, boards, and investors measure and scrutinize AI investments will rightfully become a heck of a lot tougher. Will the pace of innovation continue? I for sure think so. In fact, I'm convinced AI adoption is inevitable, but I am less certain about the when it will happen and the who it will happen for, and how much adoption will those folks choose to pursue. I do doubt it's going to be the case that everyone everywhere adopts at warp speed. In fact, I seriously wonder whether the enterprise will be able to adopt fast enough to keep up with the innovation that will come from big tech companies, because they're going to continue to heavily invest. But the bottom line is, I think every constituent out there is going to have heightened expectations of AI across the board. Its cool factor is going to need to get cooler, ROI is going to need to show itself more obviously, and so on. If more of these proof points don't emerge, I think it's entirely possible we could see a slowing enthusiasm from corporate leaders on the enterprise use case for AI, which would probably have them slowing their sprint, in all fairness, towards investment in 2026. It's not going to have them stop, but they might start jogging or even speed walking instead of sprinting until more evidence of ROI presents itself. So there you have it. 2025 is going to be a year where all of us are going to be watching for AI proof points and the consequences. Thanks for watching.